It is a delicate balancing act that is being played out at the White House and in state houses across the country. The balance between health and safety and jobs in our economies. It is also largely the subject of the latest edition of the Fairfax KSAT Rivard Report poll that was released this morning. Welcome to a virtual town hall on KSAT.com, RivardReport.com, and Fairfax.org. I'm Steve Spriester. I want to thank all of you for joining us, and I also want to get right to our panel so we can delve a little bit deeper into some of the issues that we talked about in this poll. Joining me, Robert Rivard from the Rivard Report, Christian Anderson from Fairfax, Lisa Baratachea from Fairfax, and DeMonte Alexander from Fairfax. Thank you all for being with us.
Hey,
Bob, I want to start with you, Bob. Your reaction to what we see in this poll.
Well, first of all, the poll is perfectly timed. Of course, it doesn't take into account Governor Abbott's announcements or order on Monday, but it very much, I think, fills in a lot of the blanks around his action and the actions by Mayor Ron Nirenberg and Bexar County Judge Nelson Wolff over the last weeks and months. And there's a precarious balance between opening the economy back up slowly but surely and sheltering in place, maintaining social distancing, and the majority of people are more worried about containing the COVID-19 outbreak than rushing into, economic business as usual, which is probably impossible anyway. So people are cautious, but people want to maintain social distancing, and most people are going to probably stay at home, work from home if they're allowed to. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people out there suffering, and as Governor Abbott said, we've got to take some steps to try to get the economy open. There are differences between his approach and the mayor and county judge, and it'll be interesting to watch those in the coming days as those differences become more evident. Notably, the governor's disinterest in a mandatory usage of facial masks.
Yeah, I want to bring up, Bob, you brought it up. I want to bring it up. It's number 14 in our graph where we talk to people about exactly how they feel about social distancing. And it's quite a difference. Are you concerned social distancing will go on too long? 28%. Concerned social distancing will end too soon? 56%. Is that surprising to you that we're seeing that?
No surprise to me at all. People are concerned about themselves, their loved ones, their friends and colleagues. And the fact of the matter is the federal government was not prepared for a pandemic. And so we have not been able to engage in the level of testing that would give us the kind of security of being able to track and contain the virus with a high level of confidence. We're left to watch different models, and that's created a sense of uncertainty among the public, and they're right to feel that way.
Yeah, and Governor Abbott was actually asked the question about the polls. The Texas Tribune came out with a poll before our poll came out that basically showed the same thing. People are concerned about ending these restrictions too soon. And Governor Abbott said, well, then just stay home. That seemed to be his answer to the whole thing. Thank you, Bob, for your initial thoughts here. Let's go to Christian Archer now to talk about exactly what you took out of this poll, Christian.
Well, Steve, let me back up and just make sure that people understand the mission of Fairfax. We're a nonpartisan group. We brought the KSAT Rivard Report Fairfax team together to make sure that we get a fact-based, data-driven issues, attitudes, and trends that shape San Antonio. And, originally, when we did our very first poll in February, obviously we didn't realize the impact that COVID-19, the dramatic impact it was going to have on San Antonio, obviously the entire country. So we sped forward what was going to be our second poll to focus almost exclusively on COVID-19. So I appreciate Bob Rivard and KSAT and our partnership.
Right. There's no agenda here. It's just facts, bare facts.
Just the facts. So, we did a poll sample size large enough that you can look at just the city or also just the county in the polling data. I think that the results were very telling about how San Antonio experienced COVID-19, and I think that when the mayor was so angry about the fact that the cohorts from the cruise ship, when that person was let go, who ended up having a positive test in North Star Mall and to watch his reaction. And, he literally said it was irresponsible and reckless to have let that person out, I think was a real wake up call for the city and for the county and for leadership to pay attention to this pandemic, even before other cities and other major areas had really taken notice. And I think the mayor's reaction and his stern warning about how reckless and irresponsible it was are the reasons why the local government agencies are polling so well.
Let's show those numbers while we're talking about them quickly, Christian.
Sure.
And so I didn't mean to interrupt you, but let's put up those numbers. I think it's graph number 9. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. And when you compared them to, and on bearfacts.org, we have both polls up. The original poll that we did in February of 2020, Ron Nirenberg's total favorability was, let me see here.
Well, right now,
his total favorability was 56,
right,
and now it's 74.
Right.
And you look at the county judge, his favorability was 55. It's now at 71. And the right direction, wrong direction for the city and the county also had these pretty dramatic spikes. And I think that really goes to show the reaction that both Ron Nirenberg had and County Judge Nelson Wolff. Even their nightly reports and updates on the coronavirus and how our community is impacted has really shown a lot of leadership, and people have responded. The mayor's unfavorability is actually a pretty remarkable number. The people that viewed him unfavorably in February has dropped by 1/3, which is a remarkable number. I've been involved in politics in this community for going on 2 decades, and to have numbers that high, is a real testament to leadership in a pandemic. And I think that those numbers really stick out to me. I know that we're going to get into a lot more of the details, but I think that moment in time when the mayor was so angry about the fact that they had let a person who tested positive go and they immediately went to a shopping mall, brought the level of concern in Bexar County and San Antonio very high very quickly. And it's clearly shown in the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if we go back to that first graph, we saw the approval numbers for the governor very high, 70%, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the difference, we in the poll we tested the United States Congress, which actually still has a little bit of a bump, but they're pretty unfavorable. But local government, and I'm including the state of Texas, Governor Abbott was polling at 70% favorability in Bexar County and in San Antonio. So I think that people are responsive to the local leaders rather than what seems to be a lot of mixed messaging coming out of Washington, D.C., where it clearly seems to be more of a partisan fight. I think on the local level, even with the governor, that there's been a lot more interaction and a lot more faith in the local leadership than leadership coming from Washington.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to Lisa Bartechea now, who is also with the Bearfax, part of the Bearfax Brain Trust, I like to call them. Lisa, you are steeped in economics. You worked for the Hotel Motel Association. You were an economic advisor to Governor Perry. What do you see in these numbers? I'm guessing there's some economic factors that you see in here.
Well, I think that the thing that stands out to me the most is that, as Bob pointed out, that people are still more concerned about safety than they are about the economy. And I think that resonates through businesses. I think that reopening businesses is going to be hard for businesses if they don't have customers. And if people don't feel safe going to places of business, then they won't. It's going to be more hurtful to the business. And so I think the fact that people are more interested in the safety, the masks and social distancing, people are afraid to be out in the public. And as a business owner, if I'm having to reopen up my hotel, how do I instill safety for my customers? And if I open up the hotel, will people be coming to the hotel for me to open the door to bring on more staff to be able to handle a bigger workload, a bigger just daily routine.
Right.
And then what is it going to look like for businesses to limit interaction with customers? With hotels, are you going to have a maid or housekeeper in your room every day? I mean, maybe the change is maybe not so much anymore. Maybe there's a change in how people are getting their linens, and there's a lot of, depending on the business, things, business as usual is not going to be typical. It's going to be different. And I think that the work of the local economic committee, and then of course the state committee, I think that the most important thing for businesses is that they have a place to go for guidance. And when you look at our numbers, that the question that I like the most is about people's feelings, and how most people answered that they're worried. And the second most frequently answered feeling was being hopeful and then fortunate. And so I think that because people are still largely worried, that there is going to be a resistance to bring more customers into businesses. And so from a business economic perspective, I think that the reopening, while it's one thing to grow the economy and bring the economy back, if people ultimately don't feel safe by engaging in commerce, it's going to be for naught.
Yeah, that was an interesting question. Just off the top of their head, how people felt. You know, we named several emotions that were in there, and it was certainly the dichotomy between people being worried, but people also being optimistic and hopeful. We put that graph up now, how respondents have been feeling during the pandemic. 31% said they were worried, 27% said hopeful, 25% said they felt fortunate, 15% anxious, 15% grateful. So it's a balancing act for the politicians that we've been talking about, Lisa. It's also a balancing act for these businesses to make people feel safe when they come back, correct?
I think that's key.
Yeah, Steve, I think that there was another really interesting question that we've been bantering about, and that is, you know, we asked voters whether or not they thought the worst was yet to come.
Right.
And 58% of the respondents said the worst is still yet to come. And I think that is, speaking to Lisa's point about being uneasy, is people are still very nervous about going out in public and how to do it and how to interact. You know, when the governor said that restaurants could open up with 25% of, you know, of their tables being available, I don't feel comfortable doing that yet. I don't know how people feel about going out in public and interacting with people, especially when, you know, when nearly 2/3 of the people say that the worst is yet to come.
Yeah, and that's actually what we're looking at right now. We're taking that graphic full, Christian. 58% say the worst is yet to come. 31% say the worst is over, and 11% didn't answer the question. So that is a huge margin between people still, you know, kind of hunkering down, for lack of a better word, and trying to figure out what happens next. I want to bring DeMonte into this conversation as well. DeMonte, I want to bring up graph 7. And this talks specifically about coronavirus impact on the respondents that we're talking about here. Someone in their household has been laid off, 22%. Someone in the household is working fewer hours, 39%. Someone in the household working from home, 50%. Someone in the household has been designated as an essential worker, 50%. DeMonte, what do you get from this set of questions?
So I think most of my colleagues have kind of touched on kind of what we share similarly, but I think this is what we expected. Well, I see across the board, we knew that we were already dealing with a lot of these issues when it comes to low wages, you know, the cost of healthcare, affordable housing, which all is economic issues as well. But we felt that, you know, and that's, again, the reason why we felt the survey was important to put out there to kind of get an idea of the impact and if some of these issues have been compounded by COVID-19.
You know, and I also want to point out something that we have on Bare Facts on your website right now, the fact that this poll is likely voters. This poll is not, you know, people that haven't voted before and some other demographics that maybe we're missing in this poll. Talk a little bit about what you can do on Bare Facts right now.
Right. So what people will see when they visit the site from this time from last is obviously there's a new survey added. So they'll be able to click on the facts and see the most recent poll. But what we found from our last poll is that people, were saying, hey, well, I didn't get a call, I didn't get an email, I didn't get to weigh in. And so although it's not a scientific approach, we felt it was necessary to give people an opportunity to voice their opinion. So at the top right of our website, at the top right, there's a COVID-19 survey where individuals who did not get a call or an email to participate in the survey, they can click and take the exact same survey that the other 668 people did, word for word, question for question, that will be submitted, and we'll be able to track that as well. So it'd be interesting to see how close the scientific survey weighs against the online survey once we have enough data.
Yeah, barefax.org is the website to go to, where you can take the exact same poll that the 668 people that just weighed in took. What do you?
Right.
Yeah, Steve, if I could, I just want to add one more thing, and that is, a lot of times people talk about polling, and it's kind of this mysterious. You only get numbers that people want you to see.
Yeah.
With the KSAT Rivard Report Fairfax team, we put up every single question that we asked, and then you can actually get down into the demographics. We asked 99 questions in this poll, and you can get into the demographics. And the question that you had asked, DeMonte, regarding, how do people feel about the economy and what their financial situation is? There's a big disparity between Anglos and people of color when it comes to their financial situation and how they view the future. People of color in this community are much more worried than Anglos or more educated people. And that's in the demographics that you can get into on the site on each one of these questions.
Yeah, it's broken down into graphs on the site, as a matter of fact, by not only demographics, but also party. I mean, Republicans, Democrats, Independents.
That's right. We're nonpartisan. It is a poll of likely voters in this coming November. And so it's not reflective of the entire community. It's reflective of people that are registered to vote. And that's important to know because people that are not registered to vote are further down on the economic scale. And probably this has a bigger impact on their lives. So I would say that it's actually a fairly conservative poll.
All right, we have a surprise visitor with us. I think Dave Metz, the pollster, is in the Zoom waiting room right now, and we're going to put him on the spot with our 4 other guests now, and just kind of get his. He just left. He just dropped out. Okay, I guess he surprised us there. We expect him on tomorrow, though. When we talk tomorrow from 6:30 to 8, we're going to start the conversation on KSAT 12 and then and KSAT.com simultaneously, and then take it all online at 7 o'clock. Dave Metz, the pollster, will join us there, along with the members that you see with us, and the San Antonio Mayor Ron Nirenberg and County Judge Nelson Wolff. Would be fascinating to see what they have to say about this whole thing. Anything that changes, Bob, do you think, because of anything that happened with the governor yesterday?
Well, I mentioned at the outset, Steve, that I think we're going to have to carefully watch the governor's more ambitious opening than the mayor and county judge were comfortable with, particularly with some of the social distancing measures. Nearly 2 weeks ago, the mayor and county judge appointed a 9-member task force of public health and medical experts. It's called the COVID-19 Health Transition Team, and it was specifically assembled to develop strategies for slowly reopening our local economy while continuing to combat the spread. I think it's very important in the next week that Mayor Nirenberg and Judge Wolff bring that task force out to where the public can see them, that they don't just serve as an advisory background function to the mayor and county judge, but in fact they engage directly with the public. And that we hear from these experts, because it really is a task force of the best and brightest locally in their fields, that we hear from them that, in contrast to what's being ordered at the state level, what local officials think is the most prudent course of action. Many of us, regardless of the order in Austin, will continue to follow the mayor and county judge very closely on their, what are now not mandated emergency orders, but their recommended practices. So, for instance, using a mask while going to H-E-B or another essential business out there. And I just think it's very important that the transition team now come in and play the role and give the public a level of assurance that locally we have a handle on everything.
Are you surprised at all? We've talked about the county judge and the mayor and the governor's approval ratings. Also, some of the health departments get pretty good approval ratings. This is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, 77% approval. San Antonio Metro Health, 73% approval. That's almost on par with what we're seeing from the elected officials.
Steve, I think we have by and large, a great team of public servants in elected office and professionals, whether, the city manager's office or the 9,000 civilians and 3,000 or 4,000 first responders that report directly up to the city manager through the city, or those that work for Judge Wolf. Judge Nelson Wolf has been the long-time trusted veteran. He's been through a lot of campaigns in this city, and people trust him, and that shows. Ron Nirenberg is more the second-term mayor being tested for the first time in crisis, and he's come through very strongly. Reminds me very much of how strong Phil Hardberger did early in his first term as mayor after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and other cities said they couldn't take so many of the displaced, and Hardberger, of course, opened up the former Kelly Air Force Base and opened up the arms of the city, and his popularity numbers never went down ever again. And so I think it's Ron Nirenberg's finest hour too, and it's great to have competent people in positions of public trust in a time like this.
Yeah, they certainly stepped to the forefront in this whole thing. Thanks, Bob. Lisa, I want to ask you a question. I mean, we're all parents, but a lot of us are dealing with our kids at home and dealing with distance learning. The opinion from parents on distance learning didn't do so well in this poll. Can you talk about that a little bit? 48% said it's not productive. Here, we got it up right now.
Yes, so I would say it was extremely and then somewhat. For the most part, I mean, I have a young daughter, and I'm fortunate that she's young and that I don't have to do, really difficult math or anything very taxing. But the fact that there is so much curriculum every day, I can see how parents who are working from home, it would be a struggle. And so being forced to account for your child's academics while you're trying to maintain your normal job, or what is a new normal, has been difficult. And for parents who are trying to work, there's not a lot of oversight or constant oversight. And so I can see how, your child is free to do whatever they are going to do while you are busy working, that there would be less oversight, less accountability, less hands-on, and basically lower productivity. And so that was something that was interesting. I just think it's new for parents. It's difficult. It's challenging for all of us trying to juggle breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks, and homework, and assignments, and then working, and then all the other house things that are happening. So I can appreciate the numbers. I empathize with the numbers. I'm not surprised by the numbers.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no pandemic handbook for educators or parents or students in this whole thing. It's kind of just was sprung upon us. So it's interesting, though, to see that kind of
we're all figuring it out together.
We're all trying to figure it out together. Were you struck at all with the concerns about unemployment that people had in the community?
Because our poll is primarily is based on voters, likely voters, I think I was a little uneasy with the fact that so many people seem to manage the finances fine. I felt that there would be more people who would be more concerned about their financial experience, if you will. So I was same thing kind of with the children being at home. There was a pretty small population of people who we polled who had children. So I think in both of those, I just think from a polling standpoint, our demographic is just a little bit probably different than the norm.
Yeah, and to Lisa's point, I wanted to add on to that, if you can imagine, us who do have internet access or broadband, with all those different challenges and things you mentioned, the parents or the families who don't have internet access at all, and they're having to experience this entire situation without those resources as well. So, and we're very cognizant of who we're speaking to with our survey, and that's what, a big part of my job is trying to figure out how to reach other folks that are not being communicated with. One step of that is having an online portion. Even though, again, it's not scientific, but we do get some feedback and we do get to see how other folks feel about it. And also, a big part of this is going to be, how do we take this conversation and this data away from the website and away from social media and start having very robust conversations and dialogue about some of these issues with our elected officials, with the community, with professionals, on how we move some of these issues forward to solve them.
Yeah, what do you think the answer is there? What would you like us to do with these numbers, DeMonte, next?
Well, I think when we initially started out, we wanted to let the poll or the survey drive what we wanted to do. It's not myself, Christian, or anyone else on the team that decides this. We're hoping that the data drives decisions. And obviously when we can do virtual town halls, but and when we're able to do so, when it's safe to do so, we can do the in-person town halls. Those work. Definitely, we have very, very strong media partners right now that are writing great content every day, not just about COVID, just about the city in general. So I think it's a collective approach. We all put our heads together and figure out, okay, what is this data showing us between what the Texas Tribune is showing, but also what we're showing here locally, and how can we pull some of those gems out of there, similar to water, similar to Fire Union, until whatever the future in transit's going to be, pre-K, all those things. We need to have larger discussions about those from the data that we pull from our charts.
Right, and the poll, both polls showed homelessness was a major concern in our community. This poll specifically talked about domestic violence and child abuse and how that is a concern in this community. So those are things that really go beyond the coronavirus and COVID-19 that we need to look at as we go forward, correct?
Right.
All right, I think we're joined now by members of the Fairfax Executive Committee. Eddie Alderete is with us, Jeff Webster is with us, and Marcy Trevino Ripper is with us. And Marcy, you're an attorney, you're a advisor for County Judge Nelson Wolff. You're his chief of staff. Your question, do you have a question for the panel today? Hi, Marcy. I think you just popped up, and I was asking you a question. I don't know if you heard it. I don't know if you heard it or not. Oh,
You're
she's
on mute.
You're on mute, Marcy. So you got to unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a default because I have young kids at home half the time.
Understandable. What did you take from this poll, and do you have any question for the rest of the panel that we have here?
My two big takeaways. I'm the chair of the Bexar County Child Welfare Board, so seeing that 81% are concerned about child abuse during this time was reassuring. We have tried to do social media campaigns asking people to kind of keep an eye on your neighbors, keep an eye on the kids in your neighborhood, because with school out, and I know there's been tons of news stories on this, they're number one reporter. Schools are the number one reporter. So the concern for child abuse happening and us not knowing about it is a big one. And to see that as a community concern is reassuring.
Yeah, I'm going to open that up to Christian or Lisa or Bob or DeMonte. Were you surprised that those numbers are so high?
I personally am not. We saw the reporting of domestic violence incidents spike early in this outbreak, and it stands to reason that you're going to have a parallel spike in child abuse. At the same time, school district officials have, this is to DeMonte's earlier point, pointed out in the inner city school districts that literally thousands and thousands of students have not been heard from since the spring break period. They don't have internet connectivity at home. They're not engaging in distant learning. Their parents aren't attempting to engage in distant learning. And so you have an awful lot of people that are just cut out of the picture right now, and that is not healthy for us. And so even those of us who are more privileged and fortunate to be working from home and getting a paycheck, the welfare of the city as a whole only as good as those most vulnerable people. And right now, it's not good.
Hey, DeMonte,
Yeah, Steve,
yeah, go ahead, Christian.
Yes, I just wanted to add, Marcy, thank you for bringing that up. But, we had another one of our executive committee members yesterday on a call bring up mental health. And in our poll, 62% of the respondents said that they felt more anxious or stressed out. We're still in the beginning phases of this. And I don't know that we're going to understand, that this poll, the data that we have today, reflects what the long-term needs of this community are. And I'm sorry to take one more back step, Steve, but one of the things that I think that we'll be doing with the next poll is helping to decide and look at what are the ways to recover from COVID-19. Hopefully we're in a recovery phase, and how to help rebuild the city, dealing with issues like child abuse, mental health issues. How we're going to help rebuild this community is going to be pivotal for all of the leadership across the board in this community, not just elected officials.
Yeah, and one of the real reasons I feel so strongly about this poll and what Fairfax does, Christian, is because of the transparency in this whole thing. Like, there's nothing to hide in this. You can see all the numbers, see who was polled, see how they go out, and I also think that has to play a part in what we do going forward when we start talking about solutions. Let's just have an open discussion on what are some of the solutions, what are some of the contributing factors, and are we doing enough as a community to meet some of those needs? So I think that's something that we also need to do, and whether it's town halls or just bring it to the forefront and have a discussion. Eddie Alderete joins us. Eddie, thank you very much. You're a member of the Fairfax Executive Committee, president of IBC Bank. What's your take on this poll? What did you find in there that surprised you or reassured you?
Well, I was intrigued with the fact that, it seems to correlate with national polling that people are nervous, people are anxious, but B, it seems like there's a little bit of a juxtaposition between the question regarding over half of the voters believe the worst is yet to come when it comes to the pandemic, yet there's a very, very strong reticence to opening the economy up again. So Bob made reference to this earlier, and you've made reference to it, Steve, as well, that it's just this constant balance between safety and economy. And so it's fascinating. And, to one extent, we're not that different from other communities who are anxious, nervous, worried, but also looking for a little bit of hope and a little bit of optimism. And regardless of how quickly we do open up, because I think the governor made a good point yesterday in saying that just because you can open up doesn't mean that you will. I know that museums are able to open up, but I know that the Whitty is not prepared to open on Friday. And so you're going to have other situations like that with other businesses. So we'll see how things move along.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, like you said, but they almost go hand in hand, because if you can't make the public feel like they're safe going into your business, they're not going to show up. Is that right, Eddie?
That's exactly right. When you go into a restaurant, I think probably the most comfortable people may feel is sitting on the patio of a restaurant where you're outdoors and you have a little bit of more breathing room. I think there's concerns about gymnasiums when they do open. How comfortable are people going to feel going to a movie theater or going to a gym? And the gym's a little harder because, the perspiration that is involved and ends up on the equipment and that sort of thing, it requires extra time and extra effort by the staff to keep it clean. And, people are able to fly right now, but how comfortable are you going to feel sitting on the middle seat of an airline? So there's still a lot of concern and a lot of worry.
Yeah. I want to open it up to anybody else who wants to talk about exactly what Eddie talked about with the economy and some of the concerns out there.
I think it was well stated, and the most important thing we can do at the state and local level now is track what kind of reaction we get in terms of positive cases as we continue to try to ramp up testing and we watch things open. Do we see a spike in positive cases, or does it appear that all of the measures to open were prudent and that we can then move on to the next phase as the governor has outlined? That will be something that we'll all watch closely over the next 2 weeks.
Marcy, I'm curious. You've been the chief of staff for County Judge Nelson Wolff. When I heard the governor yesterday say that what he says supersedes any local control on this whole thing or local mandates, I don't think that's exactly what the city and county were hoping for. Don't you think they were hoping for some sort of leeway in this whole thing?
So if you've interviewed Judge Wolff at all during a Texas legislative session, I think he'll tell you that they just don't give the judge, local governments.
They don't give a bandana.
Right, we'll say that.
Okay.
And so I don't think it's surprised. I'm sure he wasn't surprised. I don't think any of us really were. I just find it interesting that some states, I'm not going to talk about party here, but some states don't like federal involvement in their states, but the states are quick to turn around to dictate what happens locally. And I'm a big believer in everyone as citizens should be involved in their local government. It's what touches them the most. Your streets you drive on, the traffic lights, your trash, everything. And I try to preach that to my generation. And that's one other thing I did take away from this poll is 16% of the people polled were under 30, while 34% were over 60. So youngins out there, please register to vote in the November election so we can start hearing your take on this all.
Yeah. Eddie, what do you think of what you heard from the governor yesterday?
Well, I think because I've talked to people who agree and disagree, but the one common point there is everyone feels like that his announcement was a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. So even though you may agree or disagree with the actual start time and or agree with what kind of industry can open up, just the fact that you see something up ahead, whether it's May 1st or May 18th, gives you some sense of, okay, I see the direction we're headed. One of the biggest issues that we see in situations like this across the country that causes fear and anxiety is the lack of control. The fact that people can't do certain things, they don't have control. That's why they do certain things in their lives. They may be meaningless, but it feels like it gives them a sense of getting something accomplished and having control over something. And so I think, again, everyone I've spoken to about the governor's announcement feels like they begin to see the benchmarks up ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back to one of the earlier things that seems to be the big takeaway, at least on KSAT.com and the RivardReport.com, is social distancing and how people feel about social distancing. We put up these numbers. 28% are concerned social distancing will go on too long. 56% are concerned social distancing will end too soon. Now, my question on this is a poll that we did a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Do you think that this is changing at all in the last few days since this poll was taken?
Well, I would say, Steve, it's obvious to any journalist that's out and about that vehicle traffic has picked up significantly since the conversation started about the governor opening up the state. Not since yesterday when he did it, but in the previous days last week when we realized there was going to be a Monday announcement, the governor was giving interviews. Suddenly there was a lot more traffic out and about. Gas prices, by the way, started to inch back up, and more people are out and about, and more people are testing curbside services at retail and so forth. So there is a significant segment of the population that wants to break out of stay home, work at home, stay safe. And one thing we haven't mentioned in the poll, and for people that do go online and look at the details, there are significant differences between people who identify as Republican voters and Democratic voters about the balance, where they strike the balance themselves individually between social distancing and getting back out and getting active in the economy. It's not that they're choosing one side or the other; they just define the balance differently. And so we're seeing that out there, and you're going to see more of it in the coming, I would say, 10 days as we start to see some of these businesses gingerly figure out what does it mean to open up at 25%.
Yeah, and Bob, isn't that this is Christian, isn't that a huge concern for all of us that partisanship is going to seep into COVID-19 response? You know, clearly we've got a presidential election coming up in November, and the partisans are going to draw their lines in the sand and start using this as and weaponize COVID-19. Just to the panel and even to Steve, is that a huge concern that we see coming in the near future?
I certainly see it. I wrote about it Sunday that we're entering a more partisan phase of this now, and it's not. Unfortunately, we're going to see a little less social unity.
I also think what was obvious in the poll is people don't think it's an either-or choice necessarily. I mean, people are concerned about lifting the restrictions too soon. That scores very high, but they're also concerned about the unemployment numbers out there, and that scores very high. So it kind of seems right now that it's not necessarily a partisan issue, but I agree with you, Christian, that I am concerned that it will become, and I don't know that there's anything we can do for it not to become a partisan issue, certainly in the presidential race. But I kind of think, in the local races, if things stand where they are right now, I think it's been obviously a plus for the governor and the mayor and the county judge.
Steve, I also wanted to add that, I know we're talking about balancing and partisanship, but you also have to remember there are people who are scared but have no choice but to go out. And so also remembering those folks as well, that, if they had a choice, they would stay home, but they got 5 kids at home and they have to go to HEB to serve, and they have to go to the manufacturing plant to make ends meet. So just be mindful. I know there's the partisanship and the balance that those of us who have privilege, we can determine that balance of what's right for us, but there's some people who can't.
Well, and that breaks down in that one poll where we saw 50% have a family member that was deemed an essential worker in this whole thing. So that was also interesting. Christian, did you have something? I see you got your pen raised.
Oh, no.
Steve,
Yeah, go ahead,
Steve,
Bob.
if I can jump in real quickly, the Rivard Report board is about to meet. But I just want to say to Christian and his colleagues how pleased I am that they started Bare Facts as a nonprofit, nonpartisan poll. The city has always lacked that, and we really needed it. Of course, none of us anticipated we would be addressing such a serious issue now, and it's great to be in partnership with them and great to be in partnership with you, Steve, and your colleagues at KSAT. So that's my sign off. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you all soon.
All right.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. I want to go to another graph while we have about 14 minutes left in the discussion. And this is graph 16, and it talks about what local government spending to address the impact of coronavirus. As we bring that up, this one is interesting for me, is that the number one thing that people think the local government should spend on to address the impact of coronavirus, stimulating business for small business. That's 93%. 89% say job placement assistance, 88% say job training, 81% say build infrastructure, 65% say incentives for private investment. As you look at this, your reactions. Eddie, I'll start with you since you're the prominent businessman that I know on the group.
Well, I think, in any community, you have people who have a wide variety of views. And I think this is, there's not a lot that surprised me here. But one thing that I would like to see, and maybe Christian, DeMonte, or Lisa can answer this, is Christian, going back to your comment about partisanship, I'm wondering on the question of opening too soon or not opening fast enough, I'd love to see the crosstabs on that question, because I would love to see not so much the partisanship, which we can see, but I would love to see the socioeconomic ladder and how it breaks down that way.
Yeah, Eddie, it's a great point. It's an additional feature that we're adding to fairfax.org is you'll be able to see income variables. I don't know if that's up on the site yet, but I know that it's going on. Right?
So right now we have, I think, 4 to 5 demographics that we're tracking, but we do have all the crosstabs related to income. They're broken down by county, precinct, and other demographics as well, and they also have comparisons to others. So we definitely have the data. And what we've been doing until we can get it on the site is I've been getting a few emails throughout the last month of people asking for specific things that are not on the site, and we push it right out to them as soon as we can.
Yeah,
I'd like to add also that I feel like the takeaway is that people are really wanting to see local government action impacting local businesses. So even, set aside the partisanship conversation or even the economics, the majority of people and every single option for from stimulating small business owners to job training, placements, incentives, building infrastructure, it was more than 50% across the board. And I think that it's a call to action for local government to see that this is where people want government to interact with the community, with business, with the commerce, that there is a desire by the community for the government to interface here with commerce. And so I think that looks different depending on what retail or service, what job you are, or what service you're providing. But ultimately, people are saying, government, we think this is a good idea for there to be local investment into rebuilding our economy.
Lisa, isn't it also a acknowledgement that people out there realize, as concerned as they are about lifting restrictions too soon, that they acknowledge that businesses are hurting out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that everyone's concerned. Based on unemployment and people needing to file for welfare, just to hear the numbers of people who have filed for unemployment, it's so staggering. And I think that resonates with people this is hurting our economy. And I think people right now are concerned about going into depression. We've heard stories of old of the depression, but we have never had to experience anything like that. And so I don't think we want to. And I think that there's concern, worry, and anxiety around that. So I think that the knowledge and the acknowledgement that people would like to see government support businesses and commerce is the important takeaway for me.
Yeah, I guess I didn't see it as an either or proposition here. I thought people were concerned about health. They're also very concerned about businesses and the economy. Christian, I've interrupted you a couple times. I apologize for that. Go ahead.
That's okay. In the poll, the severity of the numbers, coronavirus and the fear of coronavirus was number one, but very close behind it was the closure of businesses due to the coronavirus. And I think that it's an interesting thing that both the mayor and the county judge and the governor are all going to have to deal with. When you look at, even you don't have to go that far back. Look at the poll that we did February of 2020, where we were talking about the transportation infrastructure that the mayor wanted, pre-K for SA, the upcoming 2022 bond campaign by the city, even the venue tax by the county. I think that there's going to have to be a complete reimagination of all of those things in a way that says, how do we get out of this ditch? We don't know how far down into the ditch, before we can actually start looking up and seeing the economy rebuilding. I think that that's where the mayor and the county judge and the governor, for that matter, are going to need to use their popularity to gather up momentum on both sides of the partisan scale and put, momentum behind rebuilding the San Antonio area.
Isn't
So-
didn't we do a poll number on asking people how long they thought it would take to recover? And it wasn't,
We did,
it was
Steve.
it was 12 months, right? I mean, we talked about 3 to 6, and I think we talked
50%.
about 12, and I think that was the most popular. Lisa, do you remember that one?
It was 50% thought it would take 12 months.
Do you think that's right?
I mean, I think it all
it's gonna
it
take
varies
long.
on your. Let Eddie answer, but I think it varies also on what kind of business you have and how you've been able to sustain up through now.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
here-
small businesses are probably more impacted.
We've got that graph up, and it's views on virus control and the economy over the next 12 months. Will the pandemic be controlled in 12 months? 66% say yes, 21% say no, 13% no answer. Economic recovery in 12 months. 41% say it will be recovered, 47% say not recovered, 11% didn't answer. What do you think about these numbers, Mr. Alderete?
So I think there's two issues. One question is, will the pandemic be under control by then? And the second is, will the economy be completely recovered by then? And on the economy, I think you have to look at it in phases. So what we're seeing first is the opening of restaurants and retails at 25% occupancy. And then as you move down into other industries, barbershops, hair salons, tattoo parlors, and those types that require a little more closer contact, those come way down the road. And then after that, I mean, what the seniors in high school are missing right now are proms and youth sports and graduations. And then even further down the road from that will be the mass gatherings of 18,000 people in a Spurs arena, 80,000 people in the, Alamo Dome for UTSA Roadrunner football.
Fiesta.
So when will all those Fiesta? I mean, the mayor said today that Fiesta may have to wait, and we don't know. I mean, if you think how the people on the Riverwalk for the River Parade, all the chairs are all lined up next to each other, and everyone sort of really congregates very, very closely, and so those are all major concerns. We had the first Dia de los Muertos River Parade,
Right.
and
On
I'm
KSAT
assuming
12.
we're not going to have one this year. And so, so I think for all those things to come back, and then the sad part is, as we see businesses temporarily close, a fraction of them will never open up again. And it's just a sad reality, but that's what, economic, it's the type of economic carnage that occurs in a case like this with a pandemic.
Yeah, just like I said, there's no playbook for educators and parents when it comes to a pandemic. There's not really one for the economy either, is there?
Not like this. There's no best practice. There's no guidebook. There's no manual. There's no step-by-step instruction. We have never seen something like this. And that's another reason for, I think, the high cases of anxiety and fear that you see in this poll.
Yeah. And if I may add to that, Steve, something to also consider, and I think we've had this discussion before offline, is that it's all relative to where you're at. For example, if you're someone with 2 years worth of savings, your intensity level or your anxiety level might not be as high as someone who's already at the brink of, I don't have any more money. For example, some people are protesting right now about the government being closed. They have to get back to work. So I think it's layers. And I think as long as the pandemic goes, you're going to start to see more and more attention, not only from low income, underserved communities, but you'll start creeping into the middle class and to the higher levels of society, depending on how long it goes as resources deplete.
Yeah, I was going to add, as we rebuild and as our local and state leaders figure out how to invest in our local economy and our state economy, that the concern for low wage jobs also increased in this poll. The concern of voters increased 12% in this poll. And so I would hope that our elected officials have a way to build that in and invest in the people of Texas.
Yeah, I'm just struck by the lines we see for all of these mass events that the San Antonio Food Bank puts out. And I know in this poll, we had like 10%, I want to say, of people saying that they were reliant on a food bank or other source for their food, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I think the number was 2% in February. So we're seeing that growth, and that's something that concerns me. And we've got just a few minutes here, and I want to just go around to the panel and what's your takeaway and what you hope our viewers are thinking about as they go through this poll. And Marcy, I'll start with you.
I hope people register to vote in November, especially young people, and keep an eye on the kiddos in this community, the most vulnerable.
Eddie?
I want to support something DeMonte just mentioned, because I do have a friend and a colleague who's an independent contractor, and he's got enough savings in the bank to work for a year without having to work at all. And he doesn't want to go out anywhere. He doesn't want to do anything. He just wants to stay holed up. So I think that is a very valid point. But overall, I think what this shows us is we're similar to our fellow Texans across the state. We're concerned, we're anxious, we're ready, we're nervous, but we're looking for some optimism and some leadership.
Yeah, I just find it such a valuable poll. Thank you, Eddie. DeMonte, your takes, what you want people to be thinking about?
Yeah, real quick, I just think, although, people have their varying opinions on how long it will take the virus and our economy to restable, one thing's for sure is that they believe and trust in our leadership. And as of right now, as this snapshot and Ron and the judge, the people trust their decision-making and them helping us through this.
Lisa.
I really feel like the leadership component with safety and being able to communicate how businesses interact with customers, with people, so that they feel safe. I think that that's going to be so key because people are worried, they're nervous. I think we'll see face masks for a long time. I know that there's a wide range of people's emotions and perception of safety, but I think that that's going to be really critical. I think that the mayor and the judge being on TV every day, communicating to the community has been so important. And I think that their communication and the availability of government to businesses and what safe practices look like, best practices look like, is going to be critical for our community.
Christian.
Well, I think the thing that sticks out the most to me was, Bob had mentioned earlier, back in the Hardberger days with Hurricane Katrina and the responsiveness of this community. I think it really goes to show that people are worried, but yet hopeful and feel gratitude. That's who we are. That's who San Antonio is. And, during Hurricane Katrina, we knew that there was an end period, right? We were going to be dealing with people that had a tragedy happen in their lives, but we could rally behind them. Right now, we're rallying behind ourselves. And my big takeaway from this, Steve, is we need to keep partisanship out of this. And that is, as long as our governor and our mayor and our county judge are focused on Americans over Democrats or Republicans, we will get through this faster and more united. And the more united we are, the better we are at responsiveness, and the sooner the recovery will happen. It's clear as a bell. Ron Nirenberg and Nelson Wolff do not have these huge jumps in favorability. Those are people coming over that didn't support them in the past, that are coming over to say that they now support the mayor and the county judge's actions. And I think that we're heading into a partisan season with the presidential election, and I think locally we need to stay focused and stay together on finding the long-term solution. So that's certainly what we're hoping to do with Bare Facts. We're making sure that our organization is built on the foundation of being nonpartisan, and make sure that we represent the entire city of San Antonio. So,
You know, my take is so much of this crisis and so much of what we talk about on a daily basis is numbers. We talk about numbers of people that tested positive. We talk numbers of lives lost, numbers of lives saved, numbers of ventilators, numbers of available hospital beds. And what is clear in the numbers, I think, in this poll is that the numbers show this community is concerned about safety. They've rallied around health and safety. We have flattened the curve. They are also worried about the economy and jobs and businesses around the corner and down the street, and that we are all in this together. They just want to know it's safe before they rally to save the businesses in our community. We're going to continue this conversation tomorrow. Christian, DeMonte, Lisa, Marcy, Eddie, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. That's going to wrap it up for this live stream. I'm Steve Spriester. We are all in this together. Take care of each other.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you.